everyone. My name is Mackenzie Thornberry, and I am a CSPC Program Committee member. We acknowledge that the Canadian Science Policy Conference is taking place on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We respect our traditional hosts and thank them for allowing us to operate on this land. We are about to participate in an interactive panel titled, Developing Evidence-Based Climate Action Programming, put on by Let's Talk Science. Thank you, Bonnie. Please don't forget to tweet about your favorite events and panels at the conference using @SciencePolicy or our hashtag CSPC2022. Finally, please don't forget to fill out the evaluation survey for this session in the program app. Your feedback is important to help us make CSPC even better next year. I hope you enjoy this panel. Thank you, and good luck, guys.
So hi, everybody. I'm not going to do it quite yet, but I'm going to invite folks to move a little bit closer. We are super informal today, and I am so excited to have this panel. As introduced, I'm Bonnie Schmidt. I'm president of Let's Talk Science, and we're a national education and outreach organization that engages kids from preschool to post-secondary in STEM, very broadly defined, life and health sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And physical sciences up at the front as well, too. Over the last couple of years, we've been embarking in developing a lot of climate change education programming for our audiences, which also includes educators at all the different grade levels as well. And thanks to funding from Environment and Climate Change Canada a couple of years ago, we embarked in understanding what young people are thinking about embarking in positive climate action as well. And that really was the inspiration for this session. So when we saw the whole area in the policy conference, we thought we're going to have a lot of policy wonks in the audience, and we're going to get some help with what we're doing. So that was really the genesis of our connection here in helping to bring to light what young people are thinking about climate change, what educators are thinking about climate change education, how Canada is sitting on the global scale with respect to climate education in the curriculum, how we can do better and do more, and how we can learn from organizations that have been really mobilizing the academy in developing papers and material that can be used in policy information. So the gist for us today is I'll introduce the panel in just a moment, but we want to talk about what we've been learning in our organizations, both from that individual level up to the systems level. And we're going to ask you to do some breakout discussions with us, because we're going to talk about research and findings and success practices that we know work, or we have evidence to inform policy, but then we get stuck. And it was actually something that Eliane and others have been talking about, like just with that last announcement, is how do we make policy, how do we inform policy? So you've got educators up here, you've got, I think, Michaela is the youngest person at the conference, our high school student. I will introduce in a moment, yay, right? We talk about the future. We talk about needing to have voice, young voices at the table. And sometimes we stop at university or college as being the young voice. But Michaela has actually spent most of her life understanding and thinking about climate change. Not like, somebody like me that has been, a decade or two, right? It's only a fraction of my life that we've been doing it. So I'm going to go through the introduction, and then they're going to go to different tables. So we are going to then invite the audience to convene for about a half an hour with each of the different speakers to talk more about their projects and give them advice. We have questions that we're going to walk through. Okay, so we really do want this to be informal, helpful, advisory, and then find a way to keep you all engaged in the project. So we're also going to hand out a form to, if you want to share your emails with us, we'll send you links to all the papers that we're going to be talking about and all the work that we're going to do, and we won't sell you anything. We'll just send you the stuff that we talk about today. Okay? There we go. All right, so with that, I do want to, I'll do a very quick introduction because you should be able to get the bios in the app. But Michaela, and forgive me if I just butcher your last name because I haven't gotten to know you quite well. I still can't pronounce it quite properly. But Michaela Uloho Ukandaye is a high school student who was a researcher involved with the project that she's going to talk about that was sponsored by Let's Talk Science. She will be our first speaker. And then Ruth Silver, who's a principal at Groundswell Project. Ruth and I have worked together on many really innovative projects over the years. And she was the designer and lead about the Climate Action Lab research project that the two of them will talk about. And then we wanted to move to the next stage, and how do we think about schools and more systems reform? And Isabelle Lever-Chiasson is here from the CC UNESCO Climate School Network, so she'll talk about some of the work that they've done at more of a national level. Then we wanted to say, where's Canada in the national sphere, and where is climate change education in curriculum? And we're really thrilled to have Ellen Field here, who can wear many, many, many hats. And she's a researcher who's got some pretty interesting work that is going to be coming out. But she's also the co-chair of MESI. She'll define it, but it's a network that's actually set up out of the University of Saskatchewan to look globally at what's happening with sustainability education and policy as part of the larger network. And last but not least, we'll have Darren Gilmore, who's the Executive Director of the Royal Society of Canada. They did some spectacular policy-related work through COVID-19, and he's going to share a bit about the lessons learned to get the Academy engaged and how that can transfer into One Health and climate change programming and policy. So listen to them, listen to their opening remarks, think about who and where you're going to be seated for the second half hour of the session to help inform their next steps. Okay. With that, hand it to Michaela.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michaela, and as Bonnie stated, I was a student researcher for the Climate Action Lab, and that was a project that was created by Let's Talk Science in collaboration with the Groundswell Project. And the findings from the Climate Action Lab contributed to research findings that will help Let's Talk Science create methods for youth to participate in climate action made by youth for youth. And this project consisted of a team of 82 student researchers, I was one of them, and 16 university student mentors. And these students were all representing 12 of the provinces and territories of Canada. The only territory that we unfortunately couldn't get any representation from was Nunavut. And so this was a 12-week project. And in these 12 weeks, initially we started learning about how to conduct our research. And it was ethnographic, qualitative research. And so we went through scenarios and did interviews for our peers. So the first few weeks we started to learn how to do that. And then for 5 weeks, we interviewed 2 peers every week. We'd give them a scenario and then they'd answer questions about climate action and regarding those scenarios. And then finally, we did presentations amongst our schools or amongst the youth, I guess, about climate action and what we learned from this project. And then we did a celebration where we all came together and talked about what we learned. So yeah, all the students in this project were ages 15 to 18 years old, and they were a diverse group of people just from different ethnic backgrounds, from different cultures, different religious backgrounds, different sexualities, and different genders. And so that's what really made the research project special, the fact that everyone had their own unique perspective to bring. Why I got in touch with the Climate Action Lab was because I felt very stagnant in my academics and I wanted to contribute and make an impact. And climate change was something that wasn't really talked about in Winnipeg, where I was from. And so being able to participate and give my voice to the conversation was something that I really appreciated. And so I guess I'm gonna pass it off to Ruth to speak a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Michaela. It's so awesome to be here with you. So I'm going to give you a little bit of more detail about the long-form interviews that Michaela and her research colleagues conducted all across Canada. All in all, they collected 848 interviews from different high school students across Canada. And over the 5 weeks, each week we explored a different scenario. And a scenario is a design tool that creates a new possible future through a fictional story. And our fictional stories, there was 5 different weeks and 5 different kind of themes that we explored. And it was through secondary research that our kind of adult research team identified opportunity areas that we thought were really interesting, where we saw a lot of movement in youth-led organizations and international organizations. And so I'm just going to explain each one of those to you. So essentially, young people featured as protagonists in these stories, and they went through different kinds of climate action possibilities. And so we explored the logistics, the outcomes for students, different kinds of science learning, supporting students' mental health as they were doing climate action or climate learning, and then of course pedagogy, different ways of teaching and learning. And so the first topic that we explored was many ways of knowing. So we were really in this topic trying to decenter a singular Western perspective by including traditional Indigenous knowledge and also lived experience. And the story was about a partnership between a high school and a post-secondary real research project. In the second week, we looked at training students to be leaders in a just transition kind of leadership process, where the idea was that they were learning to navigate systems change, and then they did work placements in climate-forward organizations in their communities. The third scenario we developed had students learn about climate solutions through doing. So they would learn about them in their classrooms, prototype a solution, do it with their teacher, launch it at their school. The fourth was an outdoor education, kind of integrated learning experience, and it was about exploring natural solutions through student-driven learning and student community building. And in the fifth week, the story took them on virtual reality field trips to look at habitats across Canada, and then within their own communities in real life, do observational citizen science to contribute to decoding animal languages.
Yeah, so we found many key barriers for youth involvement in climate action. Mainly there was a lack of power, just feeling like unpowered because of our age and our perceived lack of maturity. And then there's also a lack of benefit or incentive, as even with climate action, we won't begin to see like the effects until a few years down the line. And so there's not like a direct stop in like climate change. It's something that we have to work to collectively. And so there was a lack of meaningful feedback on their contributions, and a denial of pleasures such as shopping less, traveling less, or losing those easier facilitators that we have in our day-to-day life. And even just actions like going vegan or eating less meat, those are things that some people can feel deny them pleasure. And then there's also that social isolation, once again, about that perceived lack of maturity and the age barrier. And so in general, young people feel as if climate change is a punishment to them, and they've inherited these problems that they have to limit their experiences because of. And even when we do participate in climate action, it's as if we don't have a seat at that table, the big round table with all big business and people from the government that can make these decisions, but sometimes are inactive to make these changes. And once we give our opinion and contribute to the discussion, it's as if it's overlooked because of our age and other attributing factors as well. Coming from myself, an African Canadian female, it's hard to feel as if your opinion is validated. And so these are some barriers that a lot of the youth amongst the project and even just in general felt that was really inhibiting them from participating in climate action.
So those are like the not to-dos. And we also heard what we should do. And so young people today told us they want climate action experiences, multiple experiences, not just one, but they want ongoing multiple experiences that are positive, that are fun, that are social, connected, and aligned with their broader life goals. So connected to things that they're already doing. They don't want to stop doing things. They want it to build with the things that they're already have so much momentum for. So the things that there's a report here, and if you do give us your email address, we'll send you the lovely, lovely report. But I'm going to give you a couple highlights. Michaela talked about being at the decision-making table. Well, absolutely, but we need to empower young people with decision-making skills to be at those tables, to be able to participate, to feel really good about being in conversation with intergenerational folks. And we need to listen to their suggestions. We can't necessarily invite them, train them up to be part of things and not follow through on that. Young people are asking us to frame climate action in terms of helping people rather than things like CO2. So, we have a whole kind of section in the back about, carbon calculators are okay, but how could we make them more relevant and positive for young people, more relatable? We'd like to remind the folks in this room to make that every person's talents are needed in this enormous issue in front of us. And so we need to frame climate action as interdisciplinary and that it transcends curricular boundaries and that there's room for all of us for whatever we want to bring to the table. We found that addressing mental health in schools is very sensitive, that, one way to do it is to do it indirectly by presenting hopeful, positive solutions, spending more time in nature, and even offering supportive techniques, like yoga or breath work or something like that, but in a really, making sure that we don't put anybody in a vulnerable position, that everybody's feeling good culturally about doing that in the classroom setting. And the last one is offer learning that's doing. So fieldwork, experiential, inquiry, apprenticeship, and ultimately to connect that learning with green jobs.
I know just from my own personal experience as a student researcher, it really changed my perspective on climate action. And I realized that it doesn't have to be those big shows of action that you see every day with those big names that you have a picture of climate action in your mind, that these small micro actions added up together can really contribute to making a change in our greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's why I love the Climate Action Lab, because I was given the opportunity to learn, and that's something that in Winnipeg, where I used to live, there wasn't much of a conversation around climate action. And so even though it was snowing in like May sometimes, we never really spoke about the reasons why it was snowing, and it wasn't something spoke about in education. And so this is something that needs to be fixed amongst our education system, and just in people in general. We all should know that our actions, they have consequences, and we can contribute to climate action.
So I'll jump in. That was amazing. So I'm Isabelle Lavarche-Chasson. I'm joining you from the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. So I was invited to actually give kind of a school network perspective, but I'm going to weave kind of this evidence-based science from the global to the classroom. So just as a little bit of a background, working with UNESCO. So UNESCO is the UN agency not just responsible for World Heritage Sites, but also education. So it's actually known as the UN Intellectual Agency because it's doing work in science, education, culture. And I am so privileged and happy to be surrounded by all of you who are eager and in the science policy world, because I think this is where our world intersects, right? Education is super important. The classroom and what young people are learning in Canada and how that influences from the policy down and then up. I think this is where we can make the connections and get some of your ideas. So my culture, colleagues are not here, but I will tell you that education is the biggest budget of UNESCO and the biggest. So they're responsible for Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality and inclusive education for all. So what that means in the Canadian context, because I work for the Canadian Commission, I coordinate a national UNESCO schools network. So my background is also as an educator and in the classroom. And we also have launched climate change projects. We were actually a few years ago part of this global project on climate change education. exploring kind of a whole schools approach. So we had 20 schools across Canada that were piloted with 20 other countries, and we were really trying to explore what does it mean, climate action. But we were really coming from a teacher perspective. So this is really interesting because you really started with like students led, which is amazing. And then we did teacher training, and we were trying to really empower teachers to utilize better, also with engaging and facilitating with youth empowerment and mobilization. But that was kind of our angle from that perspective. Since then, I think our thoughts and reflection have grown. So we actually also had partnered with the University of Saskatchewan and SEPN, the Sustainability Education Policy Network, which Ellen has also worked with, and to evaluate this project. And it's kind of interesting because what we found was a little bit shocking. So they evaluated the 20 pilot schools and then the not pilot schools that were part of our network. And we kind of realized that climate action was happening in both. So we're like, we kind of modeled this climate action program, but evidence shows we're not seeing significant difference because we're actually seeing actions in both. But maybe that's when we reflected more about, maybe it's also the power of the network, because with the network, we are actually encouraging sharing promising practices. We're getting teachers to access resources directly in their hands. And we know education is a really complex system. If you have kids in school, you know it's chaotic. Some of us in Ontario are waiting for a strike potentially next week. But like, it's a really complex to get what is the curriculum saying? What are teachers actually teaching? How are we empowering climate change education and the knowledge that's happening there? So I guess that's what I want to say, is that there's actually big links to be made. So from a global level, we all agree human activities have a negative impact on our planet. That's actually rippled, if you think about it, into our curriculum, into the classrooms. But one of the challenges, say, because I work on a national scale, is that it's not guaranteed. In Canada, we actually have no actual set of educational attainments, even though it's one of the places we spend the most money with healthcare. So think about that. We fund and get kids to go to school every day. They're kind of forced to, actually, because you mandated to go to school your whole life. And as a country, Canada, we actually don't have any set guidance or what we want kids to learn. We have global competencies that the Canada Council, CMEC, the Canada Ministries of Education Council of Canada has agreed upon, but that's the only thing. So we don't have actually mathematics, literacy. Yes, we want them to learn that. The same thing with climate change education. We don't really know what kids are going to learn at the end of the day. So that's why it's a very inconsistent area where we actually need more evidence-based research, to be honest, and where we actually need to learn what's going on from a student perspective, from a teacher's perspective, from a systems-wide perspective. But I guess the opportunity from a teacher-educator perspective is that I think there's a lot of opportunity with teachers. They actually have huge amounts of power in the classroom. We can all say if we have good or bad teachers, right? And how that really impacts our learning. Even in higher education, who said that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be done on that level. And then also just thinking, anyways, I have more questions than answers maybe for you, but basically from this global UNESCO project and from the classrooms and the teacher perspective, what we've noticed is there's still more questions in terms of more questions, like why is one school more active on climate change education than another? How do they access resources? How do they interpret the curriculum? Because there's also a lot of ways that our teachers can take action. And then the important roles of actually partners like Let's Talk Science that are also coming in and trying to influence the systems when the systems are changing slowly. But I'll leave it at that and let the researchers then talk.
Thank you, Isabel. You set me up perfectly, so much appreciated. So my name is Ellen Field. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at Lakehead University in Orillia, not in Thunder Bay.
I'm also the chair of the Canadian Regional Hub of the MEAS program, which is Monitoring and Evaluating Climate Communication and Education. And this is a really great example of a Canadian-led project that has international impact. So this is a 6-year SSHRC-funded project being led by Dr. Marcia McKenzie at University of Saskatchewan. And the project aims to increase both the quality and quantity of climate communication and education globally. And for the MEAS project, education and communication are defined according to the Action for Climate Empowerment elements, which is, so we refer to those as ACE, and this comes from the UNFCCC Article 6, as well as Article 12 of Paris, which sort of is where education fits in those policies. So education refers to formal education from primary to higher education, along with the training ACE element, so workplace training. And communication as including public awareness, public participation, public access to information. So the project is supporting international and national policymakers to increase ambition on ACE with evidence-based insights and recommendations, and really came out of this glaring deficit of this is something that isn't benchmarked, isn't evaluated. And so we don't really know where education is at globally. So this project is attempting to fill in those gaps. So it's a global research policymaking collaboration of more than 100 partners, including the UNFCCC, UNESCO, the Global Education Monitoring Report, which is called GEM, over 50 scholars and a wide range of experts. So it takes this partnership approach focused on increasing context-informed understandings of quality climate change in education and policy and practice, which conceptualizes climate change communication and education is going beyond increasing scientific literacy to also engage in psychosocial, social-emotional, justice orientation, and action-oriented dimensions of what a holistic climate communication and education strategy would look like. So looking at that, the project is developing all kinds of research outputs, and you're very lucky because it just released everything on the first day of COP. So I'll provide a very high-level summary of what is available. And it's all on the meas.ca website. So there is an interactive data platform there where you can access all of the pieces that I'm going to highlight, as well. I've shared them with Bonnie, so they are handouts that if you sign up, you will get these and don't have to search through the MEAS website because there is a ton of data there. So the first thing I'll highlight in terms of one of the outputs is development of indicators. So first, the MEAS team conducted a comprehensive review of global data sets that can be used to monitor ACE. And so the indicators that are now available are on primary and secondary education, so that's the integration of climate change and curriculum policy, as well as student self-reported levels of knowledge. In terms of higher education, which is really around research publications, training, integration of climate change and technical vocational training policy, public awareness, public access to information. And the last is public participation. So in addition to this, working with UNESCO's Global Education and Monitoring, the project has synthesized the indicator data and developed country-specific overviews of climate communication and education for 50 country profiles. So 30 of those were just dropped, including Canada's on November 6th. And so it's the Canada profile I also have copies of, and it's a very extensive document. The previous 20 were published in 2021. So just high-level comparative analysis across countries shows that 90% of the 50 countries have laws, policies, or plans that include climate change relating to primary or secondary education. However, only 39% of countries have a national level law, policy, or strategy specifically focused on climate change education. To be clear, Canada has no ACE element or strategy or policy developed. And only 27% of the 50 countries have publicly available climate change education budgets. This is a big space in the policy space in terms of education being completely overlooked. Another aspect of the project is on case studies, so with the goal of furthering our understanding of quality ACE. So these are independent studies identified through a call for proposals. Over the project duration, there'll be 30 case studies that are funded. Last year, 12 were awarded, and last year there were 166 proposals submitted from 46 countries. Across Canada, we had 23 proposals. The last piece I will highlight is a knowledge syntheses that focus on quality ACE reviews. So Dr. Nicole Ardwin from Stanford University has led a team looking at the psychosocial factors associated with climate change action and inaction. And the second is a knowledge synthesis examining regional and cultural considerations of quality ACE, which is led by Professor Hila Lotsitska of Rhodes University in South Africa. The last piece, the other hat I will just quickly insert is next month I have a national curriculum review coming out on climate change expectations for every regional jurisdiction in Canada. And in the next 2 months, a national survey looking at youth climate emotions in Canada to better sort of benchmark where youth are at around the complex climate emotions. And I will just highlight, I tend not to use the word anxiety because that pathologizes something that is actually a very normal psychological response when you come to understand the severity that climate change poses. So with that, I will stop talking. I have many handouts. If you're interested in those pieces, come talk to me.
Bon après-midi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren Gilmore. I'm the Executive Director of the Royal Society of Canada, and I would say that I'll use anxiety only once in my talk. And that's to say that each time we put a young person on a stage to talk about how to build a better future, I feel much less anxious. So Michaela, thank you for what you did today. Thanks to Bonnie for living what we all talk about, which is, wouldn't it be great if we need the voice of youth at the table? Well, Let's Talk Science makes that happen. And we should recognize Bonnie and her team for making that a reality for so many Canadians and for a better future that we're going to have together because we involve young people in these discussions. 140 years ago, in 1882, the Governor General of the time, the Marquis de Lorne, thought it would be a really good idea to pull together the smartest minds in the country so that those minds could help build a better future. The Royal Society of Canada was established as a purpose-driven shop. In other words, today, there are 3,000 fellows of the Royal Society of Canada who represent all disciplines of scholarly research and artistic pursuit. They come from throughout the country. There are also 400 members of the College of New Scholars who are individuals within 15 years of having completed their postdoc or equivalent degree who have demonstrated outstanding achievement and are our future. Together, the 3,500 members of the RSC are committed to participating in initiatives that provide independent expertise. What that looked like in March of 2020 was a great big space to jump into. You'll recall at the start of the pandemic, for example, the Globe and Mail's readership went from 7.5 uniques a month to 13 million uniques a month in the early months of the pandemic. So high was the appetite for Canadians for sources of reliable information. Into that space, the RSC community jumped in, but not just as members. What's important for the way that we work as a shop is that of the 700 people who have contributed to research in the COVID-19 space, probably 600 of them had never heard of the Royal Society of Canada before. And that's what's most important, is inviting expertise from wherever it is throughout Canada to help address wicked problems. A year and a half ago, the G7 Science Academies, the so-called S7, published a declaration that alluded to the need to adopt a One Health approach to emerging zoonoses, but to emerging challenges in general, recognizing the interaction that the changing climate has to everything that lives on Earth. So this isn't about the environment over here and humans over here and other animals over here and plants over here. We need policy approaches that speak to integrated solutions. Our next challenge as a shop begins next week in Calgary with a G7 Research Summit on One Health, where we convene folks from around the world, from across disciplines, from historians to the arts and humanities and social sciences and natural applied sciences, folks in the chief medical officers of health, folks from the Government of Canada and others, to try to come together to discuss how we can build policy solutions based in evidence that help us address this wicked challenge of how climate impacts everything. Beyond that, we'll be doing some other work in the space of One Health by launching a task force next week. The pitch today is, if there are ways that you see that the RSC and a community of independent experts can contribute to a better policy future, I'll be sitting at one of these tables, and it would be really useful to hear from you as to how evidence-based reports, articles in the Globe and Mail, through partnerships with Let's Talk Science, with Canadian Science Publishing and others, these are great, but it's not enough, and we need more ideas. So I look forward to yours, and again, thanks to everybody for coming today, and thanks to Bonnie for having organized this.
So now we're going to call on your help. I hope you have realized that you have a panel of incredibly passionate, knowledgeable advocates for improving climate change. We're on the ground working, we're gathering evidence. Everything that everybody has been talking about has been evaluated. And there's all this tombs of data and information. And what we need help and advice on is how do we get it into the hands of the right people? How do we communicate it? Who needs to be our champions? How can you be mobilized to help get to decision makers as well? So you're not all allowed to sit at Michaela's table. I'm going to tell you that right now because we'll move you around a little bit. But our panel is going to disperse. And for everybody who is here, please share a half an hour with us so you can give us good advice. We all have experiences of our research sitting on a shelf. We have an opportunity to really inform how do we get to the next stage of climate action. How do we engage young people? How do we engage educators? How do we engage the public? And how do we engage the academy in doing things in a more streamlined, powerful, concerted effort? Okay. So with that, we've got about 43 minutes and 57 seconds left in our session. We're going to disperse. We're going to have about a half an hour to talk. We're going to be taking some notes. So if we do have some volunteer recorders, we're going to also gather the notes. But in the last about quarter to, or maybe 22, we're going to come together with some highlights. We'll probably see some convening of the highlights, and we're going to take those and actually bring them to life and action what you tell us that we should be doing with this research. Okay? And then there'll also at every table be a sign-up sheet, and as was mentioned, we'll email you the research that we're talking about. Okay? So why don't you disperse, and then people come up, and even if there's not enough chairs, let's make it work. We'll pull some chairs together and have some good discussion. Thank you. Okay, everybody, there's been some pretty awesome conversations happening. I don't know if that's actually working yet. So can we just wrap up your sentences, and then each table will have a minute or two to give back your highlights? And actually, those who are reporting back, so the facilitator or one person, our table without a facilitator, maybe come on back up here so we'll have the microphone to share. Okay? So yeah, the panel members come back, and the table nominated facilitator over there. But you don't have to read all of it, just give us a few highlights. But at least we have a microphone, then nobody's yelling. You can have my seat there. I'll stand over here. Yeah, I'll stand over here. I think Ellen and Isabel and Darren are deep in conversation. Oh, look at you. You're more articulate than I am. No pressure, panelists. We have 12 minutes left in our session. We want to hear from all of you. And I recruited a new panelist too. Love it. You just went from panel moderator to another panel. I'm Darren. No, that's good. Okay, I wandered around the room and I just really want to thank everybody for participating. Like it was very, very active conversation. We had one table that self-organized and didn't actually have a panelist there. So they were empowered to think in general about all of the work that had been presented on the panel and bring some advice. And I don't know, do you want to, maybe we'll start with that group and have a new panelist here giving us a little bit of the highlights of the table.
Hi, I'm Anne, and I'm from the schizophrenic table that had no guidance. No,
That's okay.
that's not true. We were amazing. So we're suggesting taking a multi-channel approach, build on what you're already doing well. And so for an example of what that is on what you've already started, you've got 85 high school students across the country that are trained already. Now you need to activate them and have them help lead as ambassadors and build your network across the country. Youth want to hear from youth. They want to hear from their peers. So that was our suggestion. You need them to help build the demand, use them as ambassadors to build from the groundswell all the way up. We talked about teacher training and the importance of parents' buy-in as well as children or youth buy-in, and developing some resources to help address some of the potential negative naysayers that will be out there. We talked about using industry as champions because they have to comply to regulations, and if you already show them that they're doing this, they may be able to help it and provide some resourcing as well.
Great, thanks.
Make resources available, have the youth help in the curriculum co-development. When it comes from the students to their peers, that will be more effective. We talked about don't call it education. Language is important. Avoid the federal provincial hurdles. Climate crisis is everyone's responsibility. Words matter. So be selective in how we present what it is that we're doing. Youth participatory action research. There's a lot of work out there. Build on that framework. Use some of those examples. Turn research into gaming or games. Partner with universities, colleges, IT, computer science. Caution mandating things. When we do that, it puts everyone's backs up against the wall. And the last thing was prizes, incentives to kids, contests, social media challenges. Use TikTok. That's what the kids are doing.
Got like the best notes, so we're going to actually compile everything. So Michaela and Ruth, over to you for a quick group of highlights.
Okay, we're just gonna have a little conversation up here about this. So we had some excellent teammates over here representing all kinds of different organizations, from museums to Parks Canada to a couple postdoctoral researchers, community health organization, and we got some really great advice. So one was to present our work, well, not me, but Michaela and the researchers at teachers' unions conferences. So directly to teachers, students saying, hey, we talked to all kinds of students across the country and this is what we heard. You can do this. So we thought that advice was super.
Yeah, we also talked about how there's potential there was a lot of jurisdictional barriers, and so we could potentially get out of the school system and the education system and maybe teach climate action through those methods. It could possibly be more beneficial than it is now.
Yeah, so that was a direct advice from Parks Canada. Am I allowed to say that? But to do like local work and not call it school, but do climate action, and drive systemic change outside of the school system necessarily.
Super.
Great advice.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's, in the essence of time, we've only got a few minutes left.
Thanks,
We'll compile everything.
Similar, we had an awesome conversation. We talked a lot about dissemination and knowledge mobilization and basically like communication science. And so science success stories, really getting away from the jargon and really simplifying public awareness days, so international days in years. Great advice that I loved was including milestones for policy development, like looking where are people gathering and how can we basically attend those and knock on the door directly. So similar to the teacher training, like find who your audience is and really go there. Open houses, Tiny Earth, like a lot of like, we even got into some of the potential like education, climate change education, upcycling, and student voices. Yeah, lots all over. Great conversation, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
We had a lot of different directions, but I'll sort of give a couple highlights. One, really looking to the health and how knowledge mobilization works when research then moves to policy, which then quickly informs practice, and that our education systems could greatly be modeled after that knowledge mobilization process. And the importance as well, because I look at health and I go, oh, I wish education worked that way. But it was good to hear that health researchers also are quite frustrated. And so the importance of patient advocacy groups in helping to drive some of those policy decisions. So for parents who are part of schools, if you're part of a school council, maybe this is an opportunity that you could also request better climate change education. Another piece is sort of to get, again, beyond that sort of national framework and to think around the regional context and profile success in particular regions to help drive some competition around how certain places are doing things well. And the last I'll just highlight is the need for a climate justice education approach so that we can think about climate change education intersectionally and the injustices specifically in the Canadian context. So I hope I did an okay job, group.
Darren?
Translating research to policy, our crew listed a number of challenges. Certainly we have data challenges, integrating data in the space of AMR and climate. Sort of navigating that uncertainty is not a space of comfort for a lot of scholars, and interacting with those responsible for taking decisions that have to be certain. It's important to speak the language of the person you're speaking with, was a sort of an interesting theme that came up during our chat. 3 next steps. One is, at least at the federal level, in order to advance research toward policy, understand the mechanics of parliamentary committees and Senate committees, and especially perhaps the clerks. Those are the people who are, I think, others think, that's not my opinion, that's from somebody else, are really important to know, because if you send stuff to the clerks, it gets in front of committee and it's read. Departmental science advisors is an important network to be aware of and to feed into, creating spaces as they do at the University of Calgary and elsewhere for community and partnerships in the space of climate, where all voices can be heard and you can advance together. I think that might be a theme not just of the pandemic, but in the space of climate and One Health, that we do need to do this together. It's not up to the engineers or the climate modelers or others. It's up to all of us across generations. Finally, to quote Michelle, communicate with intent. Thanks.
It's really good. So if you haven't signed up on that sheet, please do if you're interested. And it might take a couple of weeks to get all the notes compiled, but I'm also happy to share those out if everybody wants to get an idea of that. We have 3 minutes left, and I'm going to, I think, put Michaela on the spot. A lot of the groups came down to working with young people and really looking at how do we enable, how do we action? You were so wonderfully articulate in talking about why you've gotten involved. But do you want to take the stage for a couple of minutes and just tell us how you feel about this experience where we've parachuted you into a pretty big room of people who are really interested in hearing the voice of you? Like, how has this experience been for you, and how do we need to improve it to get more young people wanting to be at the table and feeling empowered? So I don't want to put you on the spot, but you don't have too long to talk, so just give us a couple of bullets. Yeah.
I guess for me, thanks, Bonnie. I guess for me, as I talked about with my group, I kind of joined the Climate Action Lab because I was feeling very stagnant. And being in Winnipeg, there was a lot of repercussions because of climate change, but no one really had the conversation. And so I've seen such a difference in climate change and like climate education in Manitoba compared to Ontario. And really made me think of how much us as youth, we really need that consistency in climate education and just in being involved. It can't just be in certain provinces, it has to be throughout. And we need to be put on the spot like that. We need that personal autonomy, and we want the opportunity to participate. At least I know I do. And I really appreciate you, Bonnie, for asking me to speak here today and for being a part of this lovely panel of people. But yeah, we just need that opportunity. And I know that I appreciated this role that I had as a student researcher. And there's so many other youth out there that would love the opportunity to do what I got to do. And so keeping it short and brief.
She's a natural, isn't she not? Awesome. So with that, I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank our impromptu panelists. And I really want to thank all of you, because it truly was a working session that you gave us great advice. So with that, I think it's coffee time now, and you get to be the head because we have 45 seconds left. So you can get out and get your coffee first. Thanks, everyone.
Sorry, Bonnie, I'll just jump in for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can't go yet.
Yeah, so she thanked you, but now let's thank Let's Talk Science for putting on such a wonderful panel.